Hello, today is January 15th, 2020, and the time is 12:33 a.m. Right now it is minus 40, somewhere in the 40s, low 40s I think, and it is cold. So if you hear the engine in the background, I'm trying to keep warm, and you can probably see my breath. So I just wanted to say today is my birthday, and apparently I was actually born 24 hours from now. I have to think about that. It's cold and I'm tired. So it's actually, from my understanding, my birthday was on the 16th, but it was written down on my birth certificate as the 15th. So whatever that's worth. A couple of other interesting things about my birth certificate is the place where I was born doesn't exist. So I thought that would be something interesting as well. And there was something else, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but whatever. So yeah, my birth date was wrong and the place doesn't exist. It's so with that said, I would like to share my birthday donut, Boston cream, here from Tim Hortons. And my tea. So I was doing some thinking, and I had done a video, and I have taken it down, and I'm just going to kind of go into it. And actually, I'm going to attach the bulk of the video that I had originally made for something else to this video, and it ties into my birthday. So I'm just gonna lead into this a little bit, and then what follows will be my the video that I had created for something else. So I was going to do a video on being baptized, and for some strange reason, apparently not uncommon, but whatever, it just fell apart on me. Had it all set up in early part of December. What I'm about to say does not change. There is something beyond here, and it does not change. There is a Most High. And what I found interesting, even sharing the story, whether it be in print or the previous video that I did, which I'm going to be incorporating into this, people and religions can't relate. And the irony being is religions are supposed to be based on all this what comes after here. And I tend to tick off everyone, whether it be people in religions, say Christians or atheists, or everybody. People against the government, I tick off. People within the government, I tick off. I just sharing the information and knowledge and the wisdom that I have accumulated over a lifetime. And part of this is based on these, I'm going to use as a descriptive, supernatural experiences, or whatever you want to call them. So I went to do this video on baptism. It fell apart, so I ended up doing a video saying, well, that never happened, but I still made the video using the body of what I want to share. And it ties into my birthday. I'm 51 years old today. I actually made it to 51. So it ties in because what I share are not just one or two or three accounts of people call it as a descriptive near-death experiences. I don't know if anyone else has ever had quite such the number of these kind of experiences of dying, being dead. I think there's a difference near death and then, well, I'll let the story speak for itself. So anyway, so that's what this video is going to be about, sharing those experiences as well as a lifetime of woo-woo experiences. And this is where I really start to lose people. There's people who believe in the woo-woo, we'll call it, say, supernatural, UFOs, other species, whatever you want to call them, and like this near death or dying. I don't like to say near death. Either you've died or you didn't. Coming close is you didn't really die. And I mean, people are going to argue that, you know, all day long, saying, well, death is permanent. Well, whatever. I'm not going to get into that discussion. So I'm just going to now let the body of the video speak for itself.
Why do you use the word who? So you immediately beg the question, why do you use the word who?
Well, how do we get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
No, it's not.
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, how did that happen?
I've told you, you don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, not as anyone
Not as anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could be that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry and molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere.
So, Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
Hello. This video may lose a lot of people, a lot of subscribers or whatever, and it is what it is. This video I'm going to be talking about, I guess, as a descriptive spiritual, as well as woo-woo things. Woo-woo being common descriptive would be like paranormal or whatever, I don't know. So I would like to start off by saying Christianity has been a part of my life since I was a kid. I was baptized as a baby, and what's interesting is I remember events when I was a baby, which I had shared with a family member who said it was impossible that I could remember those little fragments of different things in my life when I was a baby, but apparently I do. And then later on, I was still prepubescent kid, so I don't know how old I was, but I was a Sunday school bus captain. So Christianity has been a part of my entire life. Now, it's not to imply that I've lived a righteous, perfect life, far from it, and I admit to these things. I'm not going to get into all those details, at least not here in this video, but whatever. So my relationship with the Most High does not come from the writings or teachings, the interpretations of other people. And I'm going to share, I guess, my testimony to that. And again, it's probably going to lose a lot of people because events in my life are not common, they're not normal, or whatever you want to call it. So it is what it is. So I guess my experiences started before I was born. Apparently, there was a story that I heard from my mother before coming here. A fortune teller type old lady in a village had stated that she would never have any kids, but would have one that wouldn't be. Now you can interpret this however you want, but based on my understanding, and just a few weeks ago, this appears to have been has been confirmed. I survived being aborted, and this explains a lot of things in my childhood, and it explains why there wasn't any pictures of me for, I'm guessing about a year after I was born. And I do recall being told that I was born crippled or deformed or something, and my mother was embarrassed to have any pictures or memories of that. I have only one baby picture of me, and I think that's the only one that exists of me. I'm not sure. And anyway, so there was that. And while my mother was pregnant, someone had tried to kill me by trying to push my mother down some stairs in an apartment building. And all I know about the marriage between my parents was it was arranged, so I have no idea why that happened, but it happened, and it is what it is. So around 5 years old, I'm guessing around 5, I had drowned in a swimming pool, and I remember I couldn't swim. I couldn't swim, but I remember jumping into the deep end of the adult swimming pool, and there was something odd about that, which I'm not going to get into because it just sounds too out there even for me. But I had drowned, and I do recall darkness, and then there was a light, and sometime after that I remember coming to on the edge of the pool, and there was people around me reviving me or whatever, and everyone was in a panic and stuff. But I was in the pool, apparently it was so busy, the pool was packed, I remember, that no one had noticed me laying in the bottom of the pool. So there's that experience. Now this is going to tie into another event in my life, so, and then I'll briefly expand on that. So there was not a related type of experience, but I had ear infections that were so bad that apparently the doctors had said I'd never hear again. So I guess a lot of people had prayed, and my hearing not only came back, but it improved more than than normal. And then there was a time where I had accidentally drank something very poisonous, and I remember being rushed to the hospital, and the end result of that, I was still conscious and stuff, but I ended up just becoming violently ill, and I remember them giving me stuff to drink that made me vomit and everything, and it was kind of uneventful, I guess, and that's something, I guess, common for kids to do. I was very, very young when that happened. Now here's a story where adults remember talking about this for many years after, and I was supposed to have been in a vehicle that was in a very bad car accident. The vehicle was completely totaled, and I remember we were supposed to have left this place. It was out in the middle of country nowhere. At the last second, as the people in front of us were leaving, something just compelled me to get out and go into that vehicle, and so I did. And we weren't even going that direction of that car, so I guess there was a quick exchange saying, okay, well, we're gonna go to their place, and we ended up driving down this really long dirt road. And I remember something inside of me telling me to turn around. I was in the back seat with two other kids about my age. I turned around, looked out the back window, and I had seen the vehicle that I was in minutes before swerve from one side of the road to the other, and then ended up in a really deep ditch. I'm gonna guess around 6 feet deep, and there was these huge boulders in. And what had happened was the vehicle, when it landed inside the ditch, it pushed back the engine and transmission, and it pushed the transmission all the way up on top of the passenger seat where I was sitting in the front. Now, back in those days, young kids always sat in the front seat, if it was available, I guess, but I should have been killed. Where I was sitting in the passenger seat was there was a transmission, and that would have killed me. And no one could ever, the adults could never figure out what had prompted me at the last second to get out and move into the other vehicle. So there's that story. So when I was around 12 years old, I think, I was overseas visiting family, and I had some family members had some property out in the country or something. There's this huge, I guess, famous river there, and some parts of that river were extremely deep, like thousands of feet deep, and some parts were more shallow, because I remember going into other parts where you can kind of wade into the water. It was clear, beautiful water, and there was some parts which was black water. It was deep. And this other kid that I was with, we were told not to go to the river. So, of course, what do you do at that age but go to the river? And there was like a ferry dock that I guess would transport tractors and stuff. Like there was some farm fields and stuff out there. So there was this ferry dock that was on a cable, and that would, I guess, take tractors or probably even cars across this river. The river wasn't extremely wide. It was wide enough, but it was the depth. It was black water. And I remember hanging off the side of this ferry dock underneath, the ends flipped down, they folded down, and the other kids were there running and jumping off the end, jumping into the water, and I was underneath the part that folded down, and the whole thing had collapsed. I remember it hitting me in the head and pushing me under the water. And I remember looking up at the sky, and the sky was just disappearing. Like it was because I was pretty deep. It was just disappearing out of sight. It just got smaller and smaller, the surface light. And I remember the ice cold water coming up my feet, my shins, up my legs. And then I remember letting go. And it was at that moment, it was like I remember looking over my right shoulder, and there's this warm, white, prickly type of light. And I was under the water apparently for a long time. Over the years, when this has come to my mind, I've said like half an hour, 40 minutes, I don't know how long I was under the water. And I do recall something within that warm light. And the next thing I recall, I bobbed out of the water like a cork. It was like when I came out, I came out so the water level was below my chest. That's how I came out. And I remember I took a gasp of air, and I just remember looking around, and there was somebody to my left, and then someone further away to my right. The person to my left would have maybe been 10 feet. And I guess I was under the water for so long that they were giving up or something. And there was people standing on this ferry thing. And I looked over at the person, the kid that I was with. He was standing in a rowboat. And he was standing there, his jaw was wide open, and everyone looked at me like they seen a ghost. And I just kind of looked around and kind of swam up towards the ferry and kind of shimmied myself along and walked out. And the kid that I was with, we ended up walking, and he was stunned, and eventually all he said was, we're not telling my father about this. And we didn't want to get into trouble, but that experience that I had under the water parallels other woo-woo things in my life. And it's always stayed with me. I was under the water long enough that there's a safe assumption that I couldn't have survived. So I have that story. Then there was a time when I was in junior high, and there was about 12 or 14 people, like, guys, I guess my age, who for some reason were waiting for me after school one day. And I remember seeing them and tried to avoid them by changing my direction, because I had two choices of when I was leaving the school which way to go, and I ended up going a route that went behind it was like a strip mall, grocery store stuff. I was kind of heading behind there, and anyway, they all ran up to me, and they grabbed me, they grabbed my arms, grabbed my legs, and dragged me down. They got me down to like my knees, and I was kind of hunched over because they had just all piled up on top of me, hitting me and punching me. And this one guy, he had steel-toe work boots on, and he kicked me in the face, and like a soccer kick, and my head was only a couple feet off the ground, so it was pretty good. But they beat me and left me for dead, and I ended up staggering back to the school. I got into the school and ended up collapsing in the hallway, and when a teacher had come up, and so there's that story. So about it was a late 16th year. I'm gonna guess, I don't know how many months before my 17th birthday, but I was in my late 16th year, and I survived being deliberately poisoned. And apparently I was bleeding from every orifice, and I remember coming to in the hospital. It was the middle of the night, and I was literally on my deathbed. What I would learn later, the doctors, no one thought that I would survive. And I remember coming to in the middle of the night. I realized where I was, and they put I had stuff stuck in my arms, and I remember they had that little button, and I pressed the button, and the nurse came in and asked how I was, and I just remember being really super hungry. I went down from 225. I was, in martial arts, I was lifting weights, and bodybuilding and stuff, so I was, in good health, and I went from 225 to, I think, 140 pounds in like a month or so. And that was before I go into the hospital, and the nurse ran out, and a whole bunch of people, doctors and everyone, remember running in, and everyone was just surprised, and I just kept saying, I'm hungry. So the nurse had brought me 2 pieces of toast, dry toast, and I remember in the morning, it was early morning, I guess the doctor whose care I was under had come in, and he had his clipboard, and they're asking me a bunch of questions, and all I know was they were trying to figure out what happened, and then, all of a sudden now I'm conscious, asking for food and stuff. And I remember the doctor turning around to the nurse, saying, did you give him anything to eat? And the nurse is like, no, we're not supposed to. And he's just like, get him some food, whatever. And he, I guess on the chart was saying, give me triple of the regular servings, and make sure that I eat as much as I can. And it was during that time my mother and her husband they didn't come and visit me while I was in the hospital. And I had a girlfriend from a city that was far away who did come and visit me one time. And so yeah, I survived being deliberately poisoned. So I have other examples in my life, in my adult life, kind of paralleling this kind of stuff, and I've had a lifetime of woo-woo stuff, like stuff that I still try to guess maybe explain away. I'm not sure how to put it, but so I've had a lifetime of these kind of events and a lifetime of woo stuff and lifetime of research. So these examples that I have shared have brought me to where I am today, and I guess my testimony with my relationship with the Most High. So now I would like to talk about one woo-woo example in my life, and how this one example parallels the second time that I died by drowning by water. And this is where people who say in religion, I lose them, and this is where people who may have experienced these, like, again, as a descriptive, near death or dying, because I don't know of anyone that has had the buffet table of weird experiences in life. So there was one time, during the time I was living overseas, I lived there for 2 years, I had went to visit my mother and her husband, and they had a country home, I guess. There was only a house on either side, but there was bush between them, so you couldn't see the houses, and that was it. It was just dirt roads everywhere before you got to the main highway. And they had I'm gonna estimate about an 800-foot driveway to the dirt road, and then across the road was just all forest and bush and everything. My mother and I were never close, and that's a whole nother story in itself. And don't think I'm going to share that, although I give an indication why, but that's neither here or there. So, and I remember it was 1998, March 22nd, and I remember the date because I had wrote it in a journal for the woman that I married, and that's another story in itself. So I went to visit one evening, and it was one of the few times that she and I just actually sat and talked, and it was late. It was dark outside, and I remember the time because I had asked her what time it was, and it was like 9:32 or something p.m. And they had like 2 picture windows, would have been to my left, her right. I was sitting on the one couch, and she was sitting on the other couch. That would be to my left, and to my right, there was a brick fireplace, and I actually built it. It's kind of like an open concept, so you can walk around the fireplace, and on the other side was the kitchen, and directly behind the fireplace was one of those old-fashioned wood stoves that was all, reconditioned, like brand new. It was actually really nice. So we were sitting there talking, and I remember looking out the one picture window, and I saw what I thought looked like a strobe light. And as we were talking, I looked over, and there it was again. It would strobe and then like disappear, and strobe and disappear. But each time it did that, it was like getting closer to the dirt road. And I think she asked me, what am I looking at? And I said, well, there's a strobe light there. And there it was again. And she had seen it. And for some reason, in a very calm voice, she said, "Oh, that's just kids on skidoos." And I had to remind her that that strobe light, as a descriptive, was above the trees. So it's not kids on skidoos. And so we ended up crisscrossing as we walked to each picture window. So I ended up beside the couch where she was sitting, and she ended up beside the couch where I was sitting, and we're looking out the window. And the strobe light was close to the road. I don't know if it was over the road or why it was dark out, but it would flash, and then it would flash here, and then it would flash here. And then at one point, she just it was unusual, she just said, "Oh, I know what that is. That's the transformers on the telephone poles." And I had to remind her that transformers don't move on telephone poles. And then it finally was flashing over here, and she was to my left, and then all of a sudden a really bright white light crescent was across the front of the house. I guess you could call it the front yard. And she then said, "It's above the house." And I remember looking down. It was like bright, it was so bright you couldn't see very much. Now there was snow on the ground, but it was just really bright. So probably the light was so bright and it was reflecting up, you just couldn't see anything. And as she was yelling, I looked over my right shoulder, and I had seen the light that was above the house coming through the skylight over the front door. And I remember I was turning back, and I wasn't turned back all the way to look at her, but I think I was just taking that second or whatever to like contemplate what was happening. There was no sound, no odors, no nothing unusual, and my head was still, my chin was still closer to my right shoulder, and there was that warm, prickly light, and I was looking up at it, and the next thing, I don't want to talk about too much. I don't even know what to say about what happened in that warm, prickly light. It was nothing bad. But the next thing I recall, looking out the front window, and the light just, like someone turned the off switch. And I had looked out where I was standing. I took a few steps back, I think, but I was able to see out the back kitchen windows, all open concept. And then I had seen that, so it was a lot of forest, but to the one side, I'm going to guess towards the south, there was a big, huge farmer's field, and that light appeared above the farmer's field. And I remember my reaction was that I was going to go put my shoes and coat on and run out there, like in the dark in the snow. And then it was weird because my mother was so calm, and she said, back home there's a saying, when you see stuff like that, you leave it alone. And I wanted to, like, I was trying to talk to her, like, what just happened, what's going on, what like, from her, what she remembered or knows or whatever. And she ended up walking to the side of the house where their bedroom was. And there's like French doors. And I remember when I was going into that warm, white, prickly light, she was yelling. I don't know what she was yelling, but but her voice just seemed like to be getting farther and farther away. So I followed her to the bedroom, and her husband was on the bed, and they had it was a big bedroom, and they had like a little mini living room, and he was laying on the bed. And as she walked through the door, all she said was, she was calm but angry. She kept saying, "Why didn't you come when I was calling for you?" And he was just laying there totally stunned, like, and just remembered his reaction was, he goes, "Well, I was just watching the show or something." And she said, "Well, what was so important about the show?" And he doesn't even know what he was watching. So she had asked him what time it was, and he said it was like 12:30 something a.m. So we lost time during that whole event, which seemed to be instant, but it seemed to be about like half an hour that it felt, if that makes any sense, like from my perspective. So I ended up, because it was late, and she didn't want to talk about it. She just wanted to go to bed. It was tired, and she said that I can go sleep on the couch because it's late. And I ended up spending that night, and then the next night, I remember the next day I was trying to talk to her, and she just didn't want to talk about it. I had gone out the back deck, and they had like little bit of a field, and I ended up walking. There wasn't, can't remember, I don't think there was a lot of snow on the ground, but I ended up walking down the field in the back, like their field. They had garden, and like a really big garden and stuff. And I walked to this old fence, and I was able to see the neighbor. He was standing in his backyard in looked like a white kind of beige bathrobe. He was holding a coffee mug, and I guess when I came around, he didn't expect to see me coming around through the bushes, because I was looking at the field. I was just trying to see, I don't know, whatever I could see. And I remember I looked over at him, and he looked at me holding his mug like by his chest, like at his chest height. He just shook his head no, didn't say a word. He just shook his head, turned around, and walked into their house, I guess. I don't know. But he was looking out in the field as well. So yeah, so there's one example of something woo-woo in my life, with at least one other witness of that event. I have a lifetime of all sorts of strange events, and I'm going to reiterate it. This is where I lose a lot of people in religion. I remember, just on a real quick side note, I was talking to a native lady, and I had mentioned to her about the times that I drowned and died and whatever. And I remember she got all like, oh, that's kind of, she was interested in the experience. And then I ended up telling her that second time paralleled the story I just told you, and boy, oh boy, that was just like, you could see the sparks flying from her ears when I had said that. So yeah, I just have, I don't know, I have different experiences that people can relate to, say, quote unquote, spiritually, but when I start putting them together and saying, listen, like, these things are all connected, then I just start losing people on all sides and everything else. So anyway, I might talk a little bit more about this whole thing that I wanted to do before leaving in another video, I don't know. But anyway, I just thought I'd share this story as an example of a woo-woo in my life, and I've put up some screenshots and some photos of other woo-woo things in my life, more recent ones. So, and I have videos and other photos and stuff like that that I've shared online like 10, 12 years ago. But anyway, for what it's worth. So I'm going to share some interesting tidbits about maybe who I am or my bloodline or something. Some people that I've shared this with have said it's interesting. I don't know if it has any relevance or if it's important or what it even means to me in my life. I have no idea. Some people have said that perhaps what I'm about to share explains why I'm still here, why I haven't died or stayed dead or whatever. It's kind of hard to talk about these things because, especially sharing it with the world, it's, you know, there's just a lot of haters out there, which I don't really care about, and people who are very dismissive, but whatever. So anyway, when I was a little kid, I remember hearing of an old family legend about how thousands of years ago, my family, like the bloodline, the name, was fleeing or had fled or something, the region known as ancient Sumer. And they went, I guess it would be northwest of that region, thousands of years ago. And my family is in Central and Eastern Europe, and I was born here in North America and Canada. So I never really gave that much thought, you know, throughout my life. Once in a while, just something would make me remember that, but it didn't really mean anything. And I don't even know if any of this, what I'm about to share, means anything, but for what it's worth. So in my early 30s, I had come across online an island with my last name, and in the region of ancient Sumer. And there's apparently military I don't know, reports or something about the island, just talking about, I forget, you know, what they were talking about, but there's military reports, and then some bird watching websites or something talking about the birds there on the island. And it was around this time where I also learned about this online role-playing video game, and it was about the land of Maradin. I forget what the video game was called, which I thought was kind of weird, but I was reading about the video game on its website, and I was reading about its politics, and what really got my attention was, I guess it had its own kind of fighting style, like hand-to-hand combat. And I'm reading this relating to the fighting style, their traditional fighting style. Just thinking, well, the whole thing was just bizarre. As I was reading about it, still I'm not really making just thinking, well, okay, that's unusual, so didn't know what to think about it. And then there was, still is apparently, in that region, probably be to the west of it, I'm guessing, just trying to think of my geography there, of a some sort of corporation having to do with lasers or military lasers with my last name. Now, again, none of these things, I really thought about it. And then it was in my early 40s. I was in a convenience store, just a random convenience store, went in to buy something real quick. And there was a few people ahead of me, and this guy had come in. I don't just remember him walking in, but I didn't pay much attention to him. And I was near the cash register, and we started talking. I don't even know how we started talking, but it was a very brief conversation. And the conversation had escalated to, pretty quick. And he ended up asking me what my name was. And I was kind of hesitant, obviously. I'm like, who are you? But I ended up telling him my last name. And without missing a beat, I remember him saying, how do you spell it? So I told him, and without missing a beat, he said, you have an ancient name, and there's an ancient province with an ancient city with my name. And he said I think there was a letter added or dropped to my name, but he was very insistent. He goes, that's your name. That's with the letter that's added or dropped or something. And he insisted I look it up. He goes, look this up for yourself. He had an accent. I don't know who he was. It was just really bizarre. And I had gone to the cash register, and we're talking 30 seconds, paid for whatever, and walked out the front door, and I looked down the streets. Nobody, not a car, nothing. I just thought that was kind of weird, but I ended up looking it up, and lo and behold, everything that he was telling me about this ancient province and this ancient city in the region of ancient Sumer was there, just like how he described. So I don't really know what to make of that, but it was kind of weird. And then at some point during that part of my history, I had learned that my name means fortress. Now, it would have been several years ago now that I was talking to somebody who would be in the proximity, who came from the proximity of ancient Sumer and the ancient Persian. We were talking about this, and he had said, yeah, he goes, your name means warrior for truth and justice, or something to that effect. I just kind of like, all right. And I'm thinking about everything now with my name, my bloodline, and there's a convenience store that I went into, and I knew that these people were from that region of where ancient Sumer was. And I asked this young lady there, I went in to buy something, and I had asked her, I said, by the way, have you heard of this name? And I told her my last name, and she kind of looked surprised. She goes, yeah. She goes, I'm not sure of the significance of it, but yeah, there's something to your name. She goes, the older generation would know for sure whatever the significance of my name. And I ended up telling her, I said, well, that's my last name. And she just kind of looked surprised. And there were some older people that were working there. They just kind of looked surprisingly at me, and I wasn't going to make an issue of it. I was just curious to see, what she said. And I wasn't expecting that kind of reaction. So I'm not really sure what any of this means, if anything. So is it possible that my bloodline tying into ancient Sumer has something to do with my relationship with the Most High? I'm not sure. And I look back on my life, and everything in my life has been a struggle, hardships. And I'm not saying I'm the only one, but unusual hardships and stuff. And, you know, looking back on this, what I've endured this past 7 years, the injustice and everything. And I'm not the only one, but I guess I have some questions, and after everything I've been through in life, I wish I never came out of the water. But I'm still here, and I'm still moving forward. So I just wanted to thank you for watching this video, and please like, subscribe, comment, and share.